Rob Mercuri, Republican for Congress in Pennsylvania's District 17. Why are you running for this office?
Well, Larry, first, thanks so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you. We're at a critical time in our country and its history. We have a great country, a strong democratic tradition, and I'm running to restore prosperity to our region and to bring common sense back to Washington. And we need to do that quickly because there's a divisiveness about our politics today. And many Americans are concerned with the direction of our country. And it's time to turn the page. It's time for new leadership in our country and for unifying leadership that actually brings us together on common ground. And so that's why I'm so excited to be running for Congress in Pennsylvania's 17th district.
Now, for the benefit of our viewers statewide, which part of Pennsylvania makes up District 17?
Yeah, so it's the greater Pittsburgh area. It includes all of Beaver County, and it includes most of the suburbs in Allegheny County, with the exclusion of the southeast areas. And so it's a number of wonderful communities all across the Pittsburgh region. Everybody's a Steeler fan for the most part.
Sure.
And it does include our airport as well. As I've traveled across Beaver County and Allegheny County campaigning for the last year, I've just been reminded of how great it is to be a Western Pennsylvanian, the importance of faith and family and community in our region, and how livable it is. And there's a lot that is at stake in this election. And so as I think about the policies and the issues that we're going to talk about today, I've got every person and family in our district in mind.
Representative, what is it about District 17 that can set it apart from other parts of Pennsylvania? Tell us more about the identity of the district.
Yeah, well, it's much like my identity. So my family, is from Western Pennsylvania. My mom and dad, both families who immigrated here, generations ago, came for the jobs, worked in the oil fields and steel mills of Western PA. And made a life of it, and raised my brother and sister and I in West Deer Township with traditional values and common sense, and we were excited about the opportunities that lay ahead for us. I went to West Point and served in the Army after graduating from Deer Lakes, and my community was so proud that I was serving in the United States Army. And just like so many communities are proud of our veterans. So it's an area that has a rich heritage of hard work, blue collar, steel and oil field jobs. And we've turned the corner too. We've not only got a rich heritage in the energy industry, in manufacturing, though we do, but we've also got a great tech sector in our city that has been booming for years, autonomous vehicles and tech companies. And new technologies in many fields, including innovation in the healthcare spaces, with so many great hospital networks and providers that are doing great research. So there's just so much good happening in Western PA. And again, part of the fly in the ointment for recent years has been our politics. Our government has gotten in the way of moving forward and has thrown us off track. And so that's why I'm running, is to, continue to grow this area, to celebrate the benefits and virtues of the area and our heritage, and to move us forward together.
Now, here you are running for Congress, but you already hold statewide office right now. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm a two-term state representative from the North Hills area of Pittsburgh, and represent some great suburbs of the city of Pittsburgh, and have for 2 terms. And so my district and the former district that I had before redistricting, which happened in 2020, it represents about 20% of this overall congressional district. And so I've got a running start in terms of knowing the communities that I am running to represent, and the issues that are on the table, and have spent 4 years in the state legislature working with colleagues across the aisle to get things passed. And to solve problems for Pennsylvania. I was proud during my first term to be the first freshman legislator to get a bill passed. It was remote mortgage banking coming after the pandemic. We actually got a piece of the tax bill rectified that COVID relief money was being taxed, and that wasn't intentional, but we had to change the law to fix it. And then we passed corporate net income tax reduction because we had the highest non-graduated corporate net income tax in the country at the time. And so we got that passed in my first term. Very proud of that. I also co-sponsored a bill that got passed and led on autonomous vehicle enablement, which is in the works now and part of that great tech sector that I talked about. Without that bill, that tech sector would have had to do their testing elsewhere. As it is, we've got a new test track facility that opened up in Westmoreland County. And so, enabling that industry was something that was an accomplishment that I'm proud of. And in our district office, we served over 13,000 constituents, many of them veterans who needed services from our office. And I couldn't be prouder of how we served those constituents and the work that we did in the office with our great employees and team. And so I'm looking forward to continuing that record of service in the 17th District.
For our viewers who are just tuning into this race now, can you explain the main difference between the office you hold now and the one you aspire to in November?
Sure, that's a great question, Larry. Thank you. And, the state legislature serves the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I'm one of 203 state House members, and I work with both sides of the aisle and our Senate, which has 50 members. And each representative and senator represents a portion of the state. I'm running for federal office, which is in U.S. Congress, and there are 435 congressmen that represent equal parts all across the country. In Pennsylvania, we have 17 congressional districts and 2 senators who are 2 of 100. And that forms the U.S. Congress, which passes laws that cover the federal scope of jurisdiction. And so I think it's valuable to have both experiences, to be working currently at the state level and understanding the burden of government on our constituents, and also the things that the state provides and helps to do. And I think that perspective will help me in the role that I'm seeking to represent the same people and a larger group of people in Congress, because the layers of government, while they seem distinct, they really should be working together for the same constituents. And so that's a goal of mine, is to try to knit together those different layers of our system to achieve better cooperation between our federal, state, and local levels for the good of those same citizens and constituents that each level represents.
A couple minutes ago, you enumerated a number of priorities you worked on as a state legislator. Which of those priorities would you like to carry over to Congress?
Well, here's a great one to start with: fiscal responsibility. And that just means good budgeting, right? And we know that at the federal level, our spending is out of control and has been for some time. We have a record amount of national debt right now. And every constituent, every citizen should know that they have about $100,000 of national debt that is their share of national debt. And $34 trillion is a lot of money. And it's the most, as compared to our GDP, our gross domestic product, or total output of the country, since any time since World War II. The peak of World War II is the only comparable moment where we had so much national debt. In Pennsylvania, we have a balanced budget amendment, and that means that every year it's required by the Constitution that we balance our budget, that we don't spend more than we take in revenues. And that's a good fiscal discipline and check against overreach, because sometimes, politicians who may want to get elected will overpromise, and they'll say, wow, we can send money back to the constituents, we can create big programs, we can do more in the community as a government. But I know that limited government has merits too, allowing our great economy to work on its own within the boundaries set by government, and allowing people and families to do the things that only they can do in the community. And living within our means means not spending more than we bring in as a federal government. And so I'd like to apply that same fiscal discipline that I learned in the state to our national problems and to our federal budget. And as you may know, and your viewers know, every so often, and this is coming up again in September, the Congress has to deal with whether or not they raise the debt ceiling. And that means that, again, they will take on more than what they bring in terms of revenue. And so that opportunity is coming up again. Now, I am somebody who thinks we should have a gradual approach. We don't want to have a sudden approach. We need to honor our obligations, including Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And as your congressman, I will do that. But we also need to acknowledge the problem and then work structurally towards a solution.
Now, let's find out some more about your background, Representative. What line of work were you in before you took office as a state representative back in 2020?
Sure. Well, my wife and I own and run a business in our community, a small business. It's a pack and ship store. We have 15 employees that are great and hardworking. And so, we know what it's like to sign both sides of a paycheck and to make payroll and to treat customers well and to be part of the fabric of the business community. We also know the value that small businesses bring in a community. Before that, I was in finance after a military career. So I spent 10 years in uniform. And I mentioned I graduated from Deer Lakes High School in West Deer and then went on to West Point. And my class of 2004, all of us really went straight overseas to the Iraq and Afghanistan theaters. And so I served the country in 2 tours to Iraq, one in 2005 and one in 2007 and 8 as part of the surge. And I was proud of that service and prouder of my class. My class of 2004 really sacrificed and served the country. And 14 of my classmates paid the ultimate sacrifice, which is something that I carry with me every day. These were my friends and colleagues in college and in the military. So, that price was high, but our country is worth the effort and worth the sacrifice. And I know they felt that same way.
What do you suppose the lessons are that you learned from going to West Point and that kind of a military life?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, so much discipline, so much respect for the institution of the military and those that serve. And when I went overseas to Iraq, which is a third world country that has been really, really affected by years of war and years of dictatorship and tumult, ethnic strife, that looking back at the United States, it was kind of like when an astronaut goes up into space and you see those photos of them looking back at the beautiful globe, that I was looking back at the United States realizing what we have. And what we have is the best country in the world and the best system of government ever devised and the world's strongest military and strongest economy. We have so much to be grateful for. And so, that was a perspective that I gained by serving in the military, going overseas during wartime, and then coming back and choosing to serve again in a public way, running for state house and working in the legislature and now running for Congress. So, that was really born of my military years at West Point and my tours overseas.
Let's talk about an item I saw on your campaign website. You had published, "Our ally Israel is fighting war against an enemy whose stated goal is to wipe them off the face of the earth." You say we must return to peace through strength. How do you do that exactly?
Yeah, well, first, and thank you for reading that from my website, that position. And I do feel strongly that Israel was really, really wronged on October 7th of last year when they were viciously attacked by Hamas, which is a terrorist group that is organized, and their mission is to destroy Israel, not only as a nation, but every single Jewish person. And they call it from the river to the sea. They want to destroy and eliminate the nation of Israel. And so that genocide and that type of ideology is something that Israel can't abide. And so they're defending their country to go into Gaza and work to eliminate the terrorist threat and defend their families and their country. And so I support that effort, not only for the people of Israel, but for the Jewish people as well. And So one of the ways that, to your question, we can achieve peace through strength is by being consistent and being a consistent friend to our allies with our strong military. We have to invest in our military through great training, great programs for our military members, and we have to raise our standards of recruiting. We've lost a lot in recent years where people aren't joining the military at the rate we need. And we need to continue to invest to have the best military equipment. And we're losing ground, particularly to China, on this front. And without a strong military, and that's why I call it peace through strength, and it really was the Reagan doctrine. But it was also the doctrine that got us through World War II and created, this American hegemony over the last 70 years since World War II, which is a good thing. America has been a force for good for those 7 decades and beyond. So I want us to continue that leadership, grow our military, expand our influence. And I'm not saying overseas wars. I'm saying strong military so that we don't have to go fight in the next conflagration.
Here's another item on your website I'd like to talk about. You wrote that the president won't tap the amazing resources we have under our feet in Western PA. I take it you're talking about natural gas, and what would you like to do?
Yeah, well, and it's important to note that the Biden-Harris administration has been devastating on this issue. And my opponent, Chris Deluzio, has supported their position, which is to constrain energy production in the United States. And what that does is it forces us as a country to have to import energy from overseas. It's often more expensive. It supports jobs for other countries instead of jobs here at home. And it also is less appealing and less good for the environment, that other countries produce energy at a much dirtier level, more carbon is emitted. We have the cleanest energy production in the world, and our clean natural gas industry, which is really centered here in Western Pennsylvania. We've got great resources under our feet with the Marcellus Shale that could supply energy for generations of Americans and all across the world. We should be shipping, liquefied natural gas all over the world. But the reason that we can't do it is because the Biden-Harris administration and my opponent, Chris Deluzio, have said that they would like to constrain energy production. They actually put a ban on new liquefied natural gas permits for exports. They also, as has been widely publicized, have killed many of the deals and investments for pipelines. And pipelines are the best way to transport natural gas all across the country, and could even transport it to Canada and across the world to other shipping facilities. And those efforts have been stymied as well by environmentalist groups. And what those groups miss is that the energy industry is a primary driver of jobs and economic growth, not only for our region, but all across the country. And it's a primary influencer of how we get our climate problems under control. And so it's a clear contrast between me and my opponent. My vision is to expand our energy production, double down on clean and safe and responsible natural gas use to both help clean up our environment, grow our economy, and create energy jobs, union and non-union jobs right here at home.
And while we're talking about campaign issues that appear in your website, I just want to talk about one more item there. There's a publication called The Keystone, and they printed that you had removed language from your campaign website that showed you're opposed to abortion. Tell us your side.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that article was false. What I did was create a congressional website. And on my congressional website, I listed congressional and federal issues, and that's the only thing that I did with the website. And so that story was false. And however, I'm glad to clarify my position on abortion,
yes,
which
please.
is and always has been that we should not have any federal ban on abortion, that it's a state issue. And in Pennsylvania, we have 24 weeks with exceptions. And I support those exceptions. And I also support IVF treatment. We have many friends who have used IVF, and I understand that it's a great option for many families to expand their family for those that may have trouble getting pregnant. So that's where I stand, and that's where I've always stood on this issue, and I am happy to defend it.
Now, here's an issue that is talked about by Americans. It seems several times a week it turns up on the news, and this has to do with securing our border to ultimately cut off illegal drug trade. And I know you have a position on that. What should be done to change border policy?
Yeah, and this is another clear difference between myself and my opponent, Chris Deluzio, and the Biden-Harris administration. On day one, Joe Biden signed an executive order to stop the building of the border wall. And not only that, but that the existing border fencing that had to be sold for scrap instead of used to complete the rest of that wall. President Trump built 550 miles of border fence. I went to the border and saw with my own eyes the strength and quality of that border fence and how it was used by the ICE agents and Homeland Security to keep illegal aliens from migrating into the United States. We want good immigration. We want legal immigration in this country, and we need the workforce here in the United States from good immigration. But unregulated illegal immigration does nothing but hurt the United States of America. It causes massive problems at the border in those states and also in the rest of the country where we have undocumented and illegal aliens in the country driving drug trafficking and also human trafficking into our country. And so that's just a security issue. It's a border issue. My opponent voted against a bill to close the border, and that's a big difference. He also voted against citizenship in elections, the SAVE Act, which he'll get a chance to vote on again, I think, this fall. I hope that it's a unanimous issue because only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in U.S. elections, and that should be table stakes. And so clear distinction with my opponent on both of those issues.
Now, here's another issue that you've emphasized during the campaign. It has to do with Social Security and Medicare. And you've said we have to make sure that both of these programs are fully funded. Now, before we get into that, that statement seems to imply that we should be concerned about the status of these programs. So update us on the financial health first before you propose any possible solutions.
Sure. Well, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is a consortium of business leaders across the country, endorsed my candidacy for U.S. Congress because my views are pro-business and pro-jobs and pro-fiscal responsibility. And one of the problems in this country, besides our national debt, which we already talked about in this program of $34 trillion and skyrocketing inflation, is that we have a real problem with our entitlements programs. And I am committed, and I do commit to preserving and protecting Social Security and Medicare. And I've done so at the state level with Medicaid. And so I've got a track record there. But one of the things we need to do is just face the reality that as it currently stands, the Social Security program will be bankrupt by 2035. My youngest child will graduate high school in 2031. That's not that far off, really. And so 2035, we need to figure out how to make Social Security sustainable for future generations. And, it's a good program that was enacted during a tough time in this country. It provides a retirement savings for so many millions of Americans. And there are policy proposals to fix it and to shore it up. And we need to explore those and do it quickly.
Now, on our viewers' minds is inflation. Everybody knows that everything costs more these days, and certainly people are going to be thinking about that when they go to vote in November. And do you have any ideas to rein that in?
Yes, so the fiscal responsibility that I talked about will help because the reason that we have inflation, it's an economics problem. We've spent too much into the economy. We've printed too much money at the Fed, and that's something that Congress does, right? So the Democratic Congress in Joe Biden's first 2 years, really spent us into oblivion with inflation. And they pushed so many trillions of new dollars into the economy that it really became like monopoly money. that it was flying around. There wasn't really good need for it. A lot of that COVID money ended up having to be given back or went to programs that weren't needed. And so there was a lot of wasteful spending happening in those 2 years. That is why we have the inflation that we have. 25% on average over the last 4 years, which is massive. We haven't seen that since the Carter administration. And again, the direct result of policies that my opponent, Chris Deluzio, supports, and that the Biden-Harris administration promulgated. And so I think, voters really need to take this seriously. Do they want another 4 years of Biden-Harris overspending and big government overreach, or do they want to turn the page and elect a fiscally responsible person, like myself, to represent District 17 and to, curtail this kind of overspending? Call the government to account in terms of its efficiency, its use of our taxpayer dollars. These are hard-earned dollars by Pennsylvania taxpayers, and they need to be concerned with the wasteful spending of our government, which leads to that inflation that has been, so costly for so many families. At the grocery store and the gas pump, it's $1,000 extra on average per month per family because of this inflation, and that really hurts.
Representative, we have less than 2 minutes left in our program. Use that remaining time and tell our viewers why they should vote for you in November.
Well, first of all, Larry, thank you so much for having me. You're so kind to invite me here and back to PCN to talk on the issues. Look, I am so excited to represent this area. I'm running to represent every single person in District 17. We're at an important crossroads in the history of our country where we can go the way of more government overreach and big spending and influence in every part of our lives, or we can embrace the values which I embrace, of our Constitution and our American history, which values independence and merit and responsible spending and responsible governance. We can grow our economy again. We can create more opportunities and more jobs for more people in this country. And in Western Pennsylvania, we need to bring jobs back to our region, good family-sustaining jobs. And we also need to bring common sense back to Washington. I'm running to do just that. As your congressman, I will represent each and every person in District 17. Thank you so much. Don't forget to vote, and thanks for having me.
Rob Mercuri, Republican for Congress in Pennsylvania's District 17. Thank you.
Thank you.